Good morning everyone and welcome to Children's Art. Unfortunately, I will not be able to be with you today as I am at a conference in Hong Kong, but I'm leaving you in the very capable hands of Estelle, who will support you through this first lecture, and then I will see you myself next week. Now, a few days ago I had the opportunity of seeing the movie Women in Gold. For those of you who don't know, it's the story of Maria Altman, who had a painting stolen from her family during World War II, and she moved as a refugee to Los Angeles. Now, this is a story of her struggle to get the picture of her dear aunt, Adela Bloch-Bauer, back into her possession. And what made me think of is that even though we may not all have a very famous painting that is personal to us and that belongs to our families, we all have a personal stake in the art and the artworks that are around us. And so I will first of all be taking you through a journey of my own personal art and interest in art, the artworks that I do have, and then we'll move on there to looking at other aspects of children's art. I believe that we don't necessarily have to see ourselves as good at art in order to engage children in and with art. I do believe, however, we need to have an awareness, understanding, and appreciation of art and be involved personally in art in some form. Some of you may be thinking at this point that you have no art in your lives, so let me try and convince you that that is not the case. While we may not all have a personal connection to famous paintings, as I indicated in the introduction to the lecture, when talking about Women in Gold, in addition to having access to art galleries and exhibitions, we all have access to art in our lives. Art is all around us, in nature, and in the way in which we capture special aspects and memories in nature. Let me take you on a tour of some of the objects and people I have in my life that give me a personal connection to art. While I do so, write down any thoughts and ideas about how art touches and informs your lives. At the end of what I hope is not too long, I will ask Estelle to stop the recording and get you to have a discussion about this. Welcome to Carol Carter's Art Gallery. From the top left-hand corner, the last tapestry that my mother completed for us when she was in her 80s, and two of her favorite tapestries that she created from artworks. In the top corner, an owl painted especially for me by a dear friend who knew how much I love owls, as you will come to see. In the middle row, from the left, the first painting that my husband Alan and I bought together. The next picture evokes memories of my paternal grandmother telling us about the snow, flower, etc. of the Maluti Mountains. The Maluti Mountains are in the picture. Whenever she phoned, she spoke about them, as she lived near to them. Walking past the gallery with my mother, and both falling in love with the painting of the white rural houses so familiar to us. Being with an artist and family friend in a game reserve in South Africa, where she painted the rondavels, round traditional houses where we stayed. In the last row, a scene from a seaside area where my parents had a house that we went to whenever it was holidays or when there was a free weekend, and where I learnt to walk. The painting was bought for me by my eldest brother, who knew how much this area meant to me. Then a painting that reminds me of the many hours I walked along that particular stretch of beach. Then a painting given to me by an aunt who knew how much the sea means to me and how much I love paintings of the sea, particularly from the area where I grew up. And then flowers painted by that same aunt who gave me the previous painting. This is mainly my extensive owl collection, and I could tell a story about every one if I and you had the time. Some are decorative, but some have a use or purpose, such as candle holders and the butter dish that my dog Toby is guarding. I copied the owl from a picture and painted it. The tablecloth in front of the owl collection, centre bottom, was painted for me by a friend when I left South Africa, with symbols specific to a particular group of people in South Africa. Without going into any particular order, this time you may see some of Alan's ship collection, my mother's silver and tea set collection, and my mask collection. The aesthetic and utilitarian nature of art is frequently combined, such as in flower arranging, done by Alan, creating and laying out food for a special occasion, my creation of a vase with an African mask made up and imagined by me, some Aborigine music sticks given to me by friends. One could argue that clothing, fashion, makeup, house design, coordinating clothes to wear are all aspects of art. Much admired by me, but definitely not my forte. I have some friends from South Africa who do something once a month, such as visit an art gallery. Well, the one on the left is my sister-in-law, but she is still a friend. Anyway, they all felt that while they loved viewing art, they would not be able to draw or paint themselves. One afternoon I suggested, instead of going somewhere, we should spend the afternoon painting our stories and journeys. I got out a large white sheet and we had such fun. They were all very different, and people had very different reactions and emotional responses to their artwork, as do people have with any artwork. I was given the eye by my friend, who painted the owl for me because her partner hated it and found it frightening, whereas I absolutely love it. I could not resist putting my dog Mia's artwork on display. Every morning she pulls some blankets off the bed and rearranges them to form a different creative nest. I don't think my mother would be very impressed with the way in which her crocheted blanket now appears on the floor. Now turn the recording off and reflect on art in your own lives. Please remember to turn it on again. Going back to the movie Women in Gold for a moment, some critics called the movie disturbingly, depressingly dull, while I thought it was movingly marvellous and magnificent, again showing the different perspectives and lenses with which people view art. In addition to getting me to think about art and personal connections, Women in Gold also made me think about crimes against the arts in education. Now, without any way suggesting that these crimes are as devastating as what occurred during the Holocaust, they are nevertheless criminal. The first is the devaluing of the arts, the narrowing of subject areas in education, and the movement away from a humanizing pedagogy that uses and embraces the oldest forms of sharing and communication. As Gill cites and states, evidence is now available that schools all over the country are cutting back on arts education to devote more time to subjects that make children literate and numerate. It can demonstrably be proven that activities used in teaching for the national tests destroy individuality, stifle creativity, stultify thought, and make all children respond in the same way. A sort of educational circus in which the children are the trained animals and the teachers the poorly paid ringmasters. Now, while that may be a little bit overstated, there is still an element of truth within, in my view, within that statement, because there is a lot that the national tests need to answer for. Ken Robinson, who, if you look him up, has the most amazing videos, talks about the need to create environments in our schools, in our workplaces, in our public offices, where every person is inspired to grow creatively. The second crime is the constant need to justify the arts, despite all the evidence that supports the various ways that children learn through the arts. I also went to an extremely interesting talk on children's art last week and was saddened by how much time was spent convincing the audience of the benefits and functions of the arts prior to getting to the sharing of magical arts experiences. And still someone brought up the notion that we do not have the time for these arts because we need to teach literacy and numeracy. This despite the clear interweaving of multiliteracies and numeracies into the activities. Of course, as students, it is important to understand the benefits of art. This slide and the previous one are some samples of children's art and projects that require artwork. From these and the previous pictures, you may have seen some skills and knowledge relating to art elements, as well as generic skills including collaboration, problem solving, and decision making. The third crime is that there are such strong divisions and tensions between those that hold the view that children's art is exclusively about exploration and self-expression, and those that hold the view that we need to be focusing on skills and instructing and directing children to improve and extend their art. The crime is that in this day and age, we still take on these binary views rather than realizing that both aspects of art are important and that we can make room for both unfolding and direct education. Wright talks about these three different approaches. So we have the productive approach, which is child-centered, which is all about self-expression and creativity, making arts media accessible. It's about spontaneous, free, hands-on activities, about choice, and it's maturationist and non-interventionist. And then on the other side, we have the reproductive approach, which is teacher-regulated, unidirectional. There's dialectical control and direct imitation. The teacher decides what materials are being used, how to create the artwork, etc. There is a definite focus on skills and the behavior of artists. It's pretty routinized and scripted. And then there is the one which kind of brings those two together, and that's the guided learning approach. So teachers are resources. There's a blend of both the unfolding of children's own artworks and education. There's free play along with careful guiding, inspiration, critical reflection. Children are taught to observe, describe, suggest, initiate. Having outlined some broad ideas concerning the arts, let us examine what is meant by visual arts and what is meant by media arts. Having outlined some broad ideas concerning the arts, let us examine what is meant by visual arts and what is meant by media arts. Visual arts what is meant by visual arts is that through visual forms such as painting, drawing, collage, printmaking, sculpture, ceramics, craft, photography, textiles, and electronic media, we communicate to others. We express our feelings, aspirations, and dreams, and we attempt to make some sense of our ever-changing world. What is media arts? It is the creative use of communications, technologies, and digital materials to tell stories and explore concepts for diverse purposes and audiences. Media arts represents the world using platforms such as television, film, radio, video games, the internet, and mobile media. Having outlined some broad ideas concerning the arts, we have now examined what is meant by visual arts and what is meant by media arts. Visual arts is mainly focused on in this and subsequent lectures, but we will also be looking specifically at media arts in this subject. When my daughter was about 7 years old, she asked me one day what I did at work. I told her that I worked at the college, that my job was to teach people how to draw. She stared back at me, incredulous, and said, "You mean they forgot?" This story, quoted in Gibson and Ewing, really reinforces the confident, positive attitude that children have concerning the arts, which for a number of reasons may be lost in adulthood. I remember going into a kindergarten and seeing a child with a plastic water bottle which she was covering with material and cotton wool. I made a huge mistake which should never be made when asking children about what they are doing, and asked her, "What is that you making?" Undaunted, she replied, "Can't you see it's a snow dinosaur?" Swiftly putting me in my place and simultaneously displaying exceptional confidence in her own art ability and product. If we see the arts, and art particularly in this case, as the creative manifestations of human imagination, it opens up extremely broad and enabling possibilities for both visual and media art. If we look at the purposes of art, and this is just an introduction, we will certainly be referring and returning back to these aspects in much more detail later. They are in no particular order, and I'm just numbering them for clarity. So 1, examining art as language. This includes meaning making, engaging with multiliteracies and multimodalities, and learning and using the language of art skills and techniques. 2, art for extension and enrichment. This includes focusing on aesthetic awareness, imagination and creativity, connecting with the environment, and extending and enriching social learning skills. 3, art for freedom and expression, including the therapeutic nature of art, exploration and discovering, and embarking on personal journeys. Although creativity and being fun-filled activities is usually associated with art as expression, I would argue that these purposes should and do permeate all aspects of children's art. And lastly, fourthly, art for development. That includes such aspects as fine motor development, sensory and spatial awareness, and identity development. And please excuse the little barks in the background. It's my animals demanding attention from me. So what does visual art promote? Visual arts promotes and activates emotional intelligence. It motivates children to engage in the arts. It is a way of communicating and in learning. It is a way of communicating through visual and spatial symbols, a vehicle for learning and thinking about our senses. It develops aesthetic sensitivity and satisfies our basic need for beauty. It contributes to higher order thinking, creativity, and creative problem solving. It strengthens self-understanding and can foster self-confidence about being unique. It creates sensitivity and respect for diversity. It develops responsibility, focus, concentration, and self-discipline. It reflects life and as a result naturally integrates across the curriculum areas. It is a way of getting inside our students' heads to understand them and assess their learning. A few years ago, I was supervising a pre-service teacher on a professional experience placement. Wanting some feedback from the Year 2 cooperating teacher, I arranged to meet her at lunchtime in her classroom. At the agreed time, I entered the room to find her redoing the children's artworks. It seems to me that the previous art session had been devoted to making cows' faces using brown paper bags. The teacher was now refolding the cow's ears so that they looked perfect for the upcoming display. Please replace looked perfect with stereotypical identical craft. This certainly happens in my experience, and I've seen lots of different examples where teachers have redone work. For instance, when children have woven a particular piece of artwork, and where competition is involved, and the teacher sees the artwork more or less as something that is a reflection on her rather than being for the children themselves. Templates are ways of keeping children busy without actually having to grab the nettle of teaching them art. This is particularly important because as one goes through different educational spaces, there's so much of this continual template work. And while, if we're thinking about looking at a balanced approach to the arts, I'm sure there's some, though I can't think of many, purposes and benefits of using templates. They should only be used sparingly, but they're sometimes consistently used and encouraged, particularly in early childhood. Early childhood has been described as a golden age of creativity, a time when every child sparkles with artistry. So if we look at these drawings, they were all drawn by the same boy, starting at August 2007 to October 2009. And we can see the maturation level of the drawings and how his artwork has developed through time. And although obviously the last picture is far more sophisticated, there are, in my view, all extremely good examples of artwork, which is using the imagination to create what we see in the world around us. In Sinclair, Generett and O'Toole, there is a useful diagram showing the importance of the arts, particularly the importance of learning in the arts. I'm going to try and... No, wrong way. So if you look at that diagram, you can see that learning in the arts highlights the important role they have in their spiritual and cultural lives of people, highlights the importance of the arts in cultures through history, and we're going to spend a whole lecture on some of those aspects. Provides access to unique symbol systems that convey meaning in a variety of ways, sound, gesture, etc. Through consistent engagement, develops a full range of cognitive, psychomotor, and affective domains. enables concrete development and metacognition and self-regulation. Through engagement, develops collaboration, social communication skills. Through engagements, develop creative and imaginative thinkers, acknowledges that they are a significant part of all cultures. Through consistent engagement, enables children to build cultural capital, has the capacity to cross cultural and social and societal boundaries or bounds. Through engagement, done that one already, let's go down a bit. And develops aesthetic awareness and perception, and can link with the development in other learning areas such as literacy and numeracy. So have a look at that whole diagram, particularly put in a circle form so that it's a continuum, it's ongoing, one doesn't begin before another ends, etc. And we will have another talk about it, or maybe Estelle will talk about it today.
I was so struck by the beautiful open-ended artwork at a conference that I attended recently. It was sponsored by an early childhood program in Los Angeles at Adat Ariel Early Childhood Center, and they had been using the Reggio approach and adapting that approach to their art program for a number of years. And what they were doing with liquid watercolor and some of the materials that they've gotten from Discount School Supply was incredibly beautiful, so inspiring. And so I took a lot of pictures of the atelier, as well as some of the other classrooms, and how they were implementing this incredible use of color and open-ended self-expression, using the liquid watercolor and a lot of colorations, oil pastels. I hope you find these pictures inspirational. I was just so taken with them.
Broad conditions for learning in the arts are the provision of personally relevant experiences that children are interested in, know something about, are motivated by, and can relate to. The use of appropriate materials and tools. This applies to the providing of materials that are appropriate for different ages, as well as being appropriate for the art envisaged. Time and opportunities are crucial. Children need time to effectively create artworks, rather than being rushed to complete as much art as possible. Children need to be encouraged to return to their work and take the time to develop it further, rather than a racy, one-off approach. So what we need to do is to develop effective, authentic arts experiences. And we will talk a little more about this next week. Just like in any other subject, consider the learners and yourself. What do the learners need and what are they interested in? What are your art strengths and passions that you can draw on and share? We need to constantly consider and provide creative and stimulating art environments. We also need to be providing descriptive feedback and limited direction to children. Again, something that we will examine in more detail at a later date. We need to consider opportunities for children to work individually, in small groups, and as a whole class. For quality experiences, we need to consider the interconnected aspects of exploring, experimenting, developing and making, and reflecting and appreciating. Feldman's inquiry method for art appreciation and reflection is a useful model and consists of the aspects listed below: naming, analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating. Conditions for guided learning in the arts includes moving from basic manipulation to the infusion of meaning, providing increasingly demanding materials. It requires ongoing feedback, sensitivity, and assistance. It requires teachers to themselves demonstrate aesthetic qualities and model the importance of artistic values for individuals, societies, and cultures. It requires us to be present without being intrusive and to foster productive debate in relation to art processes and products. In partnership with children, we can provide assistance, support, and strategies to overcome challenges and solve problems. And we need to use our own and the children's experiences and observations to acquire new knowledge. The next two slides are examples of the way in which different groups of students have used art to illustrate what they think art is. Some have used a mixture of natural resources and what can be found in the art room. Others have used objects such as a chair as their starting point. Once you have completed reviewing this slideshow, what I need you to do is to form a group and together create a collage showing what you think art is. You can use any materials from outside or that you can find in the art room. The only proviso is that you think carefully about what you're going to use. Don't waste any materials and make sure that you tidy the art room and put everything back where you found it. One of the biggest deterrents preventing teachers in arts is what they perceive to be the mess that occurs. Once you have completed the collage, please take the time to discuss what you learned from the process, what you have tried to convey, and what you see in other groups' collages.